After dominating the global music scene throughout the 1960s, the Beatles reached unparalleled heights in terms of popularity, influence, and musical innovation. However, by the latter part of the decade, the intense camaraderie that had once fueled their creativity began to erode. The band members, once united by a shared vision, started to drift apart both artistically and personally. While their earlier recording sessions had been characterized by collaboration and mutual enthusiasm, the dynamics changed significantly as the decade progressed. By 1966, the Beatles made a pivotal decision to retire from live touring. The pressures of constant public attention, coupled with the limitations of live performance technology at the time, made it increasingly difficult for them to replicate their complex studio arrangements on stage. Instead, they chose to focus exclusively on studio work, diving into an era of experimentation that would define the latter half of their career. This decision gave rise to some of their most groundbreaking work, but it also marked the beginning of internal divisions that would ultimately lead to their breakup. The recording sessions for the Beatles, commonly known as the White Album, released in 1968, were emblematic of this growing tension. Instead of functioning as a unified band, the members began to act more like individual artists sharing studio space. Each member brought in songs they had written separately, and many of the tracks were effectively solo efforts, backed by the others, if at all. Ringo Starr became so disillusioned with the hostile atmosphere that he briefly left the band during the sessions. Paul McCartney later acknowledged that the friction during this time was intense, noting that the band was teetering on the brink of dissolution, a fact that deeply affected the atmosphere in the studio. John Lennon would later reflect on the White Album as a turning point, remarking that listeners could actually hear the unraveling of the Beatles through the music itself. The synergy that once defined their work was giving way to fragmentation and passive-aggressive rivalries. Lennon's increasing involvement with Yoko Ono, who was frequently present during recording sessions, only added to the strain. Her constant presence disrupted the long-standing group dynamic, which had previously been a private and tightly knit unit. Many fans and even some insiders viewed her involvement as a contributing factor to the band's growing dysfunction. The following year's recording sessions for what would eventually become Let It Be were equally fraught with discord. Though released after Abbey Road, Let It Be was the last album the Beatles worked on together, and it captured a group that had clearly lost its cohesion. However, the seeds of that discord had been sown in 1968. Amidst this turbulent backdrop, one song managed to shine as a beacon of emotional sincerity and musical brilliance: Hey Jude. While the lyrics resonated with the emotional tone of the band's situation, the inspiration for the song was rooted in a more personal event. Paul McCartney began writing the song in mid-1968 as a gesture of comfort to Julian Lennon, the young son of John Lennon and his then-wife Cynthia, following their separation. John and Cynthia's marriage had officially ended in May 1968 due to John's affair with Yoko Ono. Paul, who had long been close to the Lennon family, was reportedly saddened by the breakup and felt particularly sorry for Julian, who was caught in the middle. In June of that year, Paul drove out to the Lennons' home in Kenwood to visit Cynthia and Julian. It was during this visit that he began to form the initial ideas for the song, originally titled Hey Jules. He wanted to provide some comfort to the young boy, encouraging him not to feel overwhelmed by sadness and to find strength despite the difficult circumstances. Years later, Paul reflected on the writing process, explaining that the song began with the line, "Hey Jules, don't make it bad. Take a sad song and make it better." He admitted that he had always felt sympathy for children whose parents go through a divorce, and Hey Jude was his way of offering emotional support, even if it was indirectly through music. By this time, the songwriting partnership between John and Paul had become more symbolic than functional. Their creative paths had diverged significantly, and instead of co-writing songs, they would present mostly completed compositions to one another for feedback or finishing touches. When Paul presented Hey Jude to John on July 26, 1968, he expressed doubts about a particular line: "The movement you need is on your shoulder." Paul thought it was too obscure and considered removing it, but John insisted he keep it, believing it to be the strongest line in the song. Interestingly, John came to believe that Hey Jude was not just about Julian, but also about himself, In a 1980 interview with Playboy, he suggested that the lyrics could be interpreted as Paul addressing him during a pivotal moment in their relationship. He pointed out that lines like, "You have found her, now go and get her," could have reflected Paul's subconscious support or even resignation as Jon entered a new phase of life with Yoko. Jon acknowledged that consciously Paul might have disapproved of the new relationship, but deep down he may have been encouraging Jon to follow his heart. The song's meaning has continued to invite multiple interpretations. Some critics and scholars believe it subtly reflects Paul's frustrations over his creative differences with Jon, while others think it might even be a self-reflective piece dealing with Paul's own romantic entanglements. Writer Mark Hertsgaard observed that much of the song's lyrics seem to speak more to an adult embarking on a powerful new love, rather than a child enduring his parents' separation. Lines such as, "You have found her, now go and get her," suggest the inner turmoil of someone trying to reconcile love with uncertainty. Music critic Tim Riley offered another layer of analysis, suggesting that the song's progression mirrors a personal journey. He argued that Paul begins by trying to console someone else, but eventually confronts his own emotional state through the act of singing. As the song builds toward its climactic refrain, it becomes a mantra of self-belief and resilience. Recording took place on July 31st and August 1st, 1968 at Trident Studios in London, marking the first time the Beatles used state-of-the-art 8-track equipment, which offered a broader range of sonic possibilities. The final mix, however, was done at their traditional recording base, Abbey Road Studios. Paul was so impressed with the finished version of Hey Jude that he brought an acetate copy to a party hosted by Mick Jagger at Vesuvio's nightclub in London. The event was meant to celebrate the release of the Rolling Stones' new album, Beggar's Banquet. But when Paul played the unreleased track, it reportedly stole the spotlight and changed the mood of the evening. Author John Wynne later described the moment as having ruined the party for the Stones. Marianne Faithfull, who was Mick Jagger's partner at the time, later recalled the moment vividly in a 2007 interview. She said Paul walked into the club modestly, with a mischievous smile and his hands behind his back. When asked what he had brought, he downplayed it, only to stun everyone by playing Hey Jude. According to Faithfull, the entire room was deeply moved by the song. It was the first time anyone outside the Beatles' circle had heard it. Upon its release on August 26, 1968, Hey Jude became an immediate success. Its length, 7 minutes and 12 seconds, was unconventional for a single, but it didn't hinder its performance. The song topped charts worldwide and spent 9 consecutive weeks at #1 on the US Billboard Hot 100. It remains one of the best-loved and most enduring songs in music history and continues to be a cornerstone of Paul McCartney's live performances. In his review for NME, Derek Johnson admitted that he would have preferred a shorter version, but still praised the track as a powerful and captivating piece of music. He particularly lauded the song's first half, describing it as absolutely sensational. Over time, Hey Jude has come to symbolize not just a moment of personal compassion from Paul McCartney, but also a reflection of a band in flux, caught between past glory and an uncertain future. Its timeless appeal lies in its emotional honesty, musical simplicity, and universal message of hope and healing amid personal and collective upheaval.